We're going to be in Judges chapter 9, starting Judges chapter 9 this morning. But first I want to read Hebrews chapter 11, just a touch out of that. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32 and 38 says, "And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets." And in verse 38 has a curious phrase and says, speaking of these people, of whom the world was not worthy. Now, over the last few weeks, we have covered the life of Gideon. His character commands more real estate in the book of Judges than any of the other judges. He's important to the narrative, and he's recorded in Hebrews as a legendary man of faith of whom the world was not worthy. Yet the Bible doesn't gloss over his shortcomings. Many of the heroes of our faith have less than desirable things recorded about them: adultery, pride, murder, even idolatry. Yet Scripture looks back at these men and women of whom the world is not worthy. Now, last week, Cody said that we have looked at the arc of Gideon's life when he got to the end of his class. And I think that's a good illustration, an arc. Gideon's life started out kind of low. He was unsure. He was not fully trusting in God. But by the time you get to the middle of the story, he reaches these tremendous heights and as a faithful warrior. He executes God's war plans against the Midianites, and he also refuses kingship and told Israel that God is their king. But by the end of chapter 8, that arc starts to come back down when we see Gideon takes many wives and a concubine from Shechem. While this is not uncommon in the biblical narrative, it does break from God's original plan that was established in the garden. And most always, that type of lifestyle produces complications in the lives that behave that way. And Gideon also, at the end of chapter 8, makes requests of the people of Israel, and he asks for the spoils of battle to be brought to him. It's a very kingly type of thing to do when you don't really want to be a king. And he collects all these earrings that Israel took from the dead Midianites, and the crescent ornaments and the pendants from their camels. And in Judges chapter 8, verse 26 through 27, it says, "And the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and beside the collars that were around the necks of the camels." So 1,700 shekels of gold just in earrings brought to Gideon. That works out to around 42 pounds of gold and roughly $2.5 million by today's standards in U.S. dollars. It was a lot of money. It was a lot of gold. In verse 27, it says, "And Gideon made an ephod, and he put it in his city in Ophrah. And all of Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family." This is the bottom of the ark. Now, here is a map to get us oriented to where things are located in this storyline. The red star in the north is where historians believe Ophrah was. This is Gideon's hometown. And it is also the place where he set up the golden ephod that he made from all of those earrings. And that ephod would have been a priestly garment. This is a monumental problem. The location of the Ark of the Covenant and the place of worship for Israel was in Shiloh. That's located underneath of the green star in the south. The text doesn't say why Gideon made this ephod or what he did with it other than setting it up in his hometown. But no matter why he did this, the end result of it was that it drew the people away from God and away from the place of worship that God had chosen in Shiloh. There was already a Levitical priesthood. There was already a very special ephod for the high priest in Shiloh. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 5, Moses said, "But you shall seek the place that the Lord your God will choose out of all of the tribes to put his name and to make his habitation there, and there you shall go." That place at that time was Shiloh, and they didn't go there. Gideon did not lead the people to Shiloh. He led them to Ophrah, to his hometown, to a priestly garment that he fashioned with his own hands. And then the whole nation whored after it. And it tangled up Gideon and his family. Some translations say that it snared him and his family. Some say that it trapped them. And all of Israel, depending on your translation, either says whored or prostituted themselves or played the harlot for that ephod. This is terrible stuff. And it wasn't just a local problem. It was all of Israel came to Ophrah. Gideon said, God, Yahweh, is your king. But what Gideon did with his actions and with this ephod drew the entire nation away from the kingship of Yahweh and closer to himself. And the seed of this sin at the end of Gideon's life sowed these actions into his family, and it bore fruit with one of his sons. Judges chapter 8, verse 29 through 31 says, Jerubbabel, the son of Joash, Jerubbabel is another name for Gideon. He went and he lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. So the author of the book is introducing the main character for the next chapter, in chapter 9, and that is Abimelech. And you have to keep this in mind as we go forward, that Gideon has two names. Gideon is the name of his birth, and Jerubbabel is the nickname that his father gave to him after Gideon destroyed the altar of Baal back in chapter 6. And Jerubbabel means let Baal contend. And if you remember that passage, Gideon had destroyed the altar of the Baal, and the townspeople wanted to kill Gideon for what he had done. And they came up to his dad, Joash, and Joash defended his son and told the townspeople, let Baal contend for himself. If he's all that powerful, let him handle Gideon. And the ironic point of that nickname was that Baal was powerless to fight against Gideon. So Gideon gets this nickname, Jerubbabel, let Baal contend, and it became synonymous with Gideon's break away from Baal worship at the beginning of his life. So he became this great deliverer of Israel, and at the end of chapter 8, he's settling down. They have rest on every side. He has many wives. He has 70 sons. He refuses kingship in word, but he kind of lives like one. And he tells everyone that God is their king, but then he sets up an idolatrous ephod that draws the entire nation to his hometown and away from Shiloh. And then he also has this concubine in Shechem. The son of that relationship is Abimelech. Now, if you look at the map again, you'll see two triangles, a red one kind of in the north and a yellow one in the south. And they represent Mount Ebal in the north and Mount Gerizim in the south. And there is a valley between these two mountains. They're right next to each other. And the town that is in the valley between these two mountains is Shechem. And this is a fertile valley. It's a very popular trade route in Israel, or in the Canaan land. And this is where Gideon's concubine was from, and the family of Abimelech. In Judges chapter 8, verse 23, Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you, the Lord will rule over you." But what Gideon said and what Gideon didn't match up. See, the meaning of Abimelech, the son of his concubine, adds another layer to this pseudo-kingship that Gideon was living. Abimelech means, "my father the king." He named his son, "my father the king." If you name your kid that, you must view yourself in some sort of kingship role. So at the end of chapter 8, the seeds have been sown. The idea of a king ruling over Israel has been floated by the people. Idolatry has been reintroduced into Israel. The whole nation is playing the harlot for a golden ephod placed in Ophrah, made by Gideon and set up in his hometown. And there's tension between the sons of Gideon and the sons of his concubine from Shechem. Now, I know we've gone over this several times in this class since we started this book, but the book of Judges has a cyclical pattern to it. There is sin and apostasy, then there is outside oppression by enemies against Israel, and then the people of Israel cry out to God for a deliverer, and God raises up a deliverer, and then they receive peace through the land again. And at the end of that cycle, after a period of rest from Israel's enemies, there's a refrain that lets the reader know that this cycle is starting again. And the Bible says over and over in this book, "and the people did evil in the sight of the Lord." But that doesn't happen here. The pattern in chapter 9 is different than all the rest of the chapters. It stops for the entirety of the chapter. There is no oppression by the enemies of Israel. The threat actually comes from within Israel instead, from within Gideon's family. And there is no deliverer. The hero of faith raised up by God to save the people of Israel. Instead, you have the exact opposite, like this anti-judge, King Abimelech, who leaves a trail of death and strife and destruction from within the camp. So chapter 9 is different. It's not spirit-driven, but selfish pride-driven. It's not about faith in God. It's about hubris and self-promotion. And it all ends very, very poorly. So we're going to look at the first few verses this morning of chapter 9. Look at verses 1 through 3. Now Abimelech the son of Jerubbaal went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and said to the whole clan of his mother's family, "Say in the ears of all of the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one rule over you? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh." And his mother's relatives spoke all of these words on his behalf in the ears of the leaders of Shechem, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, "He is our brother." So right from the beginning of this chapter, Abimelech is openly pursuing kingship that his father had verbally denounced in chapter 8. Gideon has died, and while he did not carry the title of a king, he did live similar to one, and his death left a vacuum of leadership that begged to be filled by one of his kids. And it was natural for the son of a king to fill that void, but then there was this tension between the 70 sons of wives and the one son of a concubine. So there's this tension, and it comes from these 2 points. Are the sons of wives going to lead, or the son of the concubine? And second, Abimelech was from a different clan or a different bloodline. These are not arbitrary details. Wives and their children often had different rights and inheritances that concubines and their children's had. I believe the first concubines that we see in scriptures are ones that come from Abraham and Jacob. And even when the nation was split and set on the Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal to read the blessings and the cursings, the children of the concubines, the tribes from the concubines, were put on the mountain of curses. Just a little side note. Now, while it was not a pattern of marital relationship established in the garden, God did regulate concubinage when he gave the Mosaic law. So there were rules about it. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole on that topic right now, but there's another rabbit hole I'm going to go down. I don't have time for both. But I want to make the point that there was tension introduced by the text between the sons of Gideon's wives and the son of the concubine, because they were not treated equally. And Abimelech is trying to assert his authority over that. Now, the second part of the tensions between the 70 sons and Abimelech is that Abimelech came from a different clan. A different clan. Here's a very tiny map that you probably can't see real well. But it shows the 12 tribes and approximately where they settled in the Canaan land when they conquered it, according to the book of Joshua. Israelite society, ancient Israelite society, was structured around first the tribe, and then the clan that you were from, and then the father's household that you were in. And marrying within these units kept the clan together and the inheritance that was promised to the families. It maintained family alliances and it maintained tribal identity. Scripture tells us, and all of this is tied to the promise of the land. Scripture tells us that Gideon was from the tribe of Manasseh and specifically from the clan of Abizarite. I probably butchered that, but you guys get the point. Gideon was from a specific tribe and a specific clan. And the tension mentioned in our text is that Abimelech's mother was from a different clan. He had got his concubine from a different clan. Doesn't say what clan it was, but it was different. So the son of a concubine with less rights and less inheritance, and from a different clan and a different bloodline that complicated his relationships and his inheritance and his power against his brothers. So Abimelech goes to the family of his mother and the family from Shechem, and he tries to drum up some support from their hometown. And he asks, is it better for you that all 70 of these sons of Jerubbabel rule over you, the ones that are not your family, or that one rule over you? Remember, also, I am your bone and your flesh. Do you want Gideon's kids who are not family? They're not going to have your best interest in mind. Or do you want me, somebody that is from this town, somebody that is from your clan? So he pitches this to his family, and the family takes that information to the leaders of Shechem or the lords of Shechem, and it is a propaganda campaign based on tribalism and fear. Sounds like politics today. Verse 4, and they, meaning the leaders of Shechem, gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal-bereth, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless fellows who followed him. So in the previous chapter, when a leader arose, in the first 8 books of Judges, it was driven by the Spirit of God and faith in Yahweh, and a deliverer was brought to free Israel from their enemies. But here, Abimelech's power is granted through seed money from a Canaanite idol, the house of Baal-bereth. And this is the Canaanite god that all of Israel turned to after Gideon died. As soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals and made Baal-bereth their god. So this is where the seed money for the rebellion is coming from. And Baal-bereth means Lord of the Covenant. So there's a covenant agreement between Abimelech and Baal when he gets this money. And the irony is that Israel is supposed to be in covenant relationship with Yahweh. We all know that. But now Israel has turned to different gods and to a different covenant agreement. And Abimelech is using these funds from an idolatrous worship to gain power for himself. So 70 pieces of silver, just enough money to hire some reckless and worthless fellows and form a ragtag army. Verses 5 through 6. And he went to his father's house at Ophrah, and he killed his brothers, the son of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. And all the leaders of Shechem came together and all Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the pillar at Shechem. So Abimelech travels to Shechem, to Ophrah, with these worthless men, this ragtag army, mercenaries for hire, and they rounded up all 70 of his brothers. They executed them on an altar-like stone, one after another, and the youngest brother got away, Jotham. In verse 6, Abimelech is crowned king by the leadership of Shechem, or the lords of Shechem. And the text also says by Beth Millo. None of the commentators really know what that is. The original word means house of the fill, and they believe that it represented some sort of foundation or rampart or fortification in the city, maybe a place where the aristocrats met or lived. And whoever these people were, represented by this term, they were significant enough to come to this coronation event. So the text says that the coronation event took place at the oak of the pillar. We don't know exactly where that is, but it is significant. The commentators all agree that this would have been a stone representing Baal propped up under a notable oak tree near or in Shechem. Large trees were often used as location markers or meeting places back in the Old Testament. I think this is just a natural thing. When my brother and I were young, we played a lot in the woods. We had about 2 square miles behind the house and 2 square miles across the street, and we just ran wild through there. And we broke down locations geographically and descriptively. And to this day, I could call my brother and tell him to meet me in the pines or meet me by the oak tree, and he would know where to go, and he could meet me there this afternoon. 40 years removed. And they did the same thing back then. There were notable meeting places and places of worship. This one is directed towards Baal Bereth, who financed the hordes of worthless men and the assassination of Abimelech's brothers. Now, before we move on, I want to point out some very important history regarding this location in Shechem. And it's going to highlight the irony of this stone and this tree that they're underneath of, and the coronation of an Israelite and what they're doing here. But you have to go all the way back to the time of the patriarchs. So we're going to rewind all the way back to Genesis and work our way back through the patriarchal story till we can get up to this again and see the significance that plays in this town of Shechem. So bear with me. This is my rabbit hole for today. Genesis chapter 12, 6 through 7. Abram passes through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moriah, or Morah. At that time the Canaanites were in the land, and then the Lord appears to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. So Abram, before God called him Abraham, he left the Ur and moved to Haran, and then God told him to go into the Canaan land. And he moved into the Canaan land, and his first stop in the Canaan land is Shechem. And there's a tree there, a notable oak tree. And God appears to him in this promised land. And Abram builds an altar right next to the tree, next to this very notable oak tree. And Shechem represents the entry point of the covenant promise made to Abraham, specifically the land promise. God said, I'm going to give you this land at Shechem. Now, some years go by. Isaac's born, Jacob's born. Jacob has grown up and he has a family, and he moves to Shechem. He buys some land there for 100 pieces of money, and he settles down with his family, and he sets up an altar called Elohi Israel. And the meaning of that is God, the God of Israel. So Jacob's all in for Yahweh. And this happens in Genesis chapter 33. So we know that Jacob is dedicated to Yahweh at Shechem. He's got an altar there. He's living in Shechem. And then in chapter 4, we have some problems develop. While Jacob's living in the town of Shechem, one of the Canaanite men, his name is actually Shechem, so that gets confusing. He takes Jacob's daughter Diana and defiles her, sleeps with her, treats her like a harlot. And the sons of Jacob are furious about this, particularly Diana's brothers who are from the same mother, Leah. The Canaanites, there's all kinds of tension between Jacob's family and the Canaanite families in Shechem because of the guy Shechem and what he did. The Canaanites wanted to intermarry with Jacob's family to ease this tension. Let's just let our kids marry. Let's just intermingle everything and all of our possessions, and it'll all be fine. And Levi and Simeon find out what happened, and they're not having it. Their sister got defiled, and they're not going to deal with it. So they agreed with the Canaanites, okay, we'll agree to this deal under one condition. You guys all get circumcised. And they went, I guess. So everybody, all the men in Shechem got circumcised. But Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, lied and just used that as a trap. And then we have this story, Genesis chapter 34, 25 through 27. Again, all of this is taking place in Shechem. Now it came to pass on the third day when they, the Canaanites who just got circumcised, were in pain, that the two sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Diana's brothers, each took a sword and came boldly upon the city, and they killed all of the males. And they killed Hamor, that's the dad, and Shechem the son, who had slept with Diana, with the edge of the sword. And they took Diana from Shechem's house, and they went out. And the sons of Jacob came upon the slain, and they plundered the city because their sister had been defiled. So Simeon and Levi killed every single man in the entire city. They plundered the city, whatever that means, and they took all of the livestock, they took all of the children, they took all of the wives. They left the entire city of Shechem empty of biological life. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have troubled me by making me obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and since I am few in number, they will gather themselves together against me and kill me. I shall be destroyed, my household and I." But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a harlot?" So Simeon and Levi went absolute scorched earth on behalf of their sister. But they went so far as to de-inhabit an entire city. And there's no way for that to go unnoticed in this foreign land that Jacob is living in. He's surrounded by Canaanite people on every side, and he is the bearer of the promises of God, and he's afraid that he's going to be exterminated himself because of what they had done and the repercussions. But God's going to protect him. In Genesis chapter 35, God says, it's time to move. Then God said to Jacob, arise and go to Bethel and dwell there and make an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau your brother. So Bethel's the place that you flee to when there's trouble. And Jacob says to his household and to all who are with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourself, change all of your garments. Let us rise up and go to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me in the way in which I have gone. So they gave Jacob all of the foreign gods which were in their hands and the earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree, which was by Shechem. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were all around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And so the family is protected, and the promises are maintained. So Jacob gets these instructions from Yahweh to make an altar in Bethel, and that he's going to protect him there. This is the place you go when you're in distress. You run to God. But before he leaves, Jacob makes sure that his family is prepared to meet with God. You have to put away all the idols. There is no more idolatry in this family. You have to purify yourselves. You have to change your clothes. And Jacob takes all of these idols and he buries them in Shechem beside a notable tree. Seeing a repetition here in Shechem? Jacob is all in for Yahweh. And the whole family of Israel is too now. So from this point, we're going to fast forward a couple hundred more years. We're going to fast forward past Joseph, past the Egyptian bondage, past the Exodus from Egypt, past Mount Sinai and the law, and past the end of we're at the end of the wilderness wandering. Moses is in charge. He's writing Deuteronomy and giving final instructions to the nation of Israel before they go into the land of promise that was made to Abram and Shechem so many years ago. Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 2 and 3. Moses is speaking, and he says, "And it shall be on that day when you cross over the Jordan to the land which the Lord your God is giving to you," so you're going into the promised land, "that you shall set up for yourself large stones and whitewash them with lime. You shall write on them all the words of the law." So Moses told the people that they're to take these giant stones when they get into the land, and they're to chisel the entire Pentateuch out on them. And he told them to build an altar, to make sacrifice, to split the nation in two halves. Half was to stand on Mount Gerizim, representing the blessings that come by obeying the covenant, and the other half is supposed to be on Mount Ebal, representing the curses that come from disobeying the covenant. So he's telling them to do all of this in Shechem. Go to Shechem. Now fast forward from Moses' commands to the beginning of the book of Joshua, when Joshua actually takes them across the Jordan River into the land. And Joshua does exactly like Moses says. He takes them to Shechem. Joshua chapter 8, verse 30 through 35. "Now Joshua built an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, on Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the children of Israel. As it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of whole stones over which no man had wielded any iron tools, and they offered on it burnt offerings to the Lord and sacrificed peace offerings. And there in the presence of the children of Israel, he wrote on a stone a copy of the law of Moses, which he had written. Then all Israel, with all of their elders and officers and judges, stood on either side of the ark before the priests, the Levites who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord, the stranger as well as he who was born among them. Half of them were on Mount Gerizim, and half of them were in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded before, that they should bless the people of Israel. And after he read all of the words of the law, the blessings and the cursings, according all that was written in the book of the law, there was not a word of all that Moses had commanded which Joshua did not read before the assembly of Israel with the women, the little ones, the strangers, and who was living among them. So Moses and Joshua made it very, very clear that what this covenant relationship entailed. Blessings for obedience, cursings for disobedience, and it was all memorialized at Shechem. It was written in stone again. And those stones were set up in Shechem for them to see. It was read aloud. It was visualized on the mountain. Blessings on Mount Gerizim and cursings on Mount Ebal. Now we need to fast forward through the book of Joshua. The land's been conquered for the most part. God has given them many victories against the Canaanites. And Joshua circles the people all the way back to the beginning, back to Shechem. And he reminds the people about what God has done for them. He reminds them of the promises to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He reminds them of the redemption that God gave them from Egypt when he delivered them by the blood of a lamb. He reminds them of the protection that he provided for them in the desert during the wandering. And he reminds them of all of the fulfilled promises, the promise that was made to Abraham right here in Shechem 450 years before. And now you guys are standing in it and you own it. And Joshua says in chapter 24, verse 15, he has all of the people together. And he says, choose this day whom you're going to serve. Whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Everybody has to make a choice. You have to make a decision, a conscious decision. Are you going to choose blessing and follow Yahweh, or are you going to choose cursing and disobey? And in verse 24, the people said to Joshua, the Lord your God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. And Joshua says, I'm warning you guys. God is holy. He is a jealous God. And if you go back on this promise, he is not going to forgive you. But they swore up and down that they're not going to idolatry. And they witnessed against ourselves, saying, we are witnesses to what we're saying. And in verses 25 through 28, so Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and put in place statutes and rules for them at Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God. And he took a large stone and he set it up under the terebinth tree that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said to all the people, behold, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all of the words that the Lord he has spoke to us. Therefore it shall be a witness against you, lest you deal falsely with your God. So Joshua sent the people away, every man to his inheritance. So if you're reading straight through the narrative of Genesis all the way to Judges, you start to see this repeated elements in the story and the irony that's taking place in chapter 9, located around notable trees, stones of significance marking Shechem. Shechem is an important place. It is a place that God promised the land to Abram and to his descendants. It is the place that Jacob dedicated his entire family to Yahweh, actually burying the idols and leaving them behind. It is the place of covenant renewal under Joshua. And there is a stone of witness that demands loyalty to God. And there is a warning that breaking the covenant will lead to curses from a holy and a jealous God. And those mountains that rose over the valleys of Shechem were to be a reminder of all of it. And now we're back in Judges chapter 9, and Abimelech is being crowned king by the people of Shechem. He has been financed by Baal-bereth, an idolatrous lord of the covenant, coronated under a tree with a pillar of stone to Baal, a notable place of worship, but not for Yahweh. It is the exact opposite of what is supposed to happen. Abimelech has forgotten the promises of God and has taken things into his own hands. He has been funded by Baal instead of being filled by the Spirit of God. He has been driven by pride and hubris instead of faith in Yahweh. And he has turned on his own countrymen. He killed all of his brothers instead of delivering them from God's enemies. He's actually become the enemy of God. And somewhere near the place that he is standing while he is being crowned is another stone with the law chiseled in it. And it is witnessing against them. It is witnessing against all of Israel. They are violating the covenant that they promised in front of Joshua, and they have dealt falsely with Jehovah. And Jehovah is holy. He is jealous. And according to Joshua, he is not going to forgive them for this. And the curses of Mount Ebal are going to come crashing down. And we'll see that in the rest of the chapter next week. Any questions or comments? I appreciate your time.